Hey everyone, it's Bob with another FinApp Controller webcast. This week we're talking about the reserve calculations of lines 6, 7, 8, and 9. These items are related to stock dividends, suspense items, and items in transfer. Before we get started with today's webcast, let's do a quick recap of the credit categories for the reserve formula. Items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 we've discussed in earlier webcasts. This week we're going to talk about the stock dividends, the short security account differences, credits and other items in suspense accounts, and items that are in transfer. So what are the reserve calc penalty items? And some of the questions we're going to discuss today is what's a suspense item? When to include in the reserve calc, whether it's 7 days, 30 days, 45 days, or immediately. Why do we include all suspense items and not just customer related? Why do we include credits and stock record shorts and not debits or longs? What's the difference between a stock record break, a stock record count, and the difference? But first, this presentation is for educational purposes only. It's not legal advice. If you're doing an actual reserve calculation, I'm going to refer you to the FINRA website where you can get their interpretations for financial and operational rules. I think the best way to make use of this presentation is to compare it versus your firm's calculation. So what we're doing here is we're keeping the firm's books and records in good order. Now that includes cash and short positions and stock and suspense accounts or account differences. All of these items are going to go into the reserve calc. For cash, if the firm has a suspense credit, then it's received cash and it hasn't credited the owner. For securities, if the firm has a short security position in suspense, it's either because there was a break, which meant that there were more long shares than short, or vice versa. That's usually occurred with paper systems. Today's systems will force an entry to balance into the stock record. Or there's account difference, meaning that the custodian has lesser number of shares than what the firm stock record indicates. Unknown debits, which are receivables, are not used in the reserve. Long shares in suspense accounts indicate that the firm has more shares than it needs to pay out its customers. Therefore, they won't be used either. So what are the time frames, and when do you include these items in the reserve formula? For line 6, stock dividends include after 30 calendar days after the dividend payment date. For lines 7 and 8, it's going to depend upon how you calculate your net capital. If you're using the basic method, you're going to include after 30 calendar days. However, if you're using the alternative method, you're going to include it after 7 business days. And for line 9, even though it says unconfirmed transfers greater than 40 days, really what's going to happen is that you're going to follow Securities Exchange Act Rule 17A13, which requires a securities count every calendar quarter. And if you have transfers that have not been confirmed greater than 30 days, then you're going to have to treat them as short security differences. So let's talk about reserve line 6, short secured stock dividends. So instead of cash, some companies will pay a dividend in shares, and that's usually through a DRIP or dividend reinvestment program. In addition, companies can split their stocks so that the market value per share is at a certain target that promotes widespread ownership. If the firm hasn't received the shares within 30 days of the dividend payment date, then you should include the market value of the shares in the reserve calc. Now for line 7, short security differences, we're going back to the Rule 17A13, which are box or security counts. And that rule requires on a calendar quarter basis, each security must be counted. And by counted, that means that the firm compares its stock record versus the custodian's records. Now, if you have short differences and they're not resolved by the 7th day of the count, then you must include the market value of the security in the reserve count. A security count might also be called a box count, and that came about when it was paper securities and they were kept in vaults or boxes. People would enter the vault to do a security count. Now, most firms will perform staggered counts by counting a portion of the securities each month. That way, they're not going through their entire stock record on a one particular day or weekend trying to count all of the securities. They'll go ahead and stagger it. They're able to do this as long as each security is counted during the calendar quarter. For reserve line 8, credits and short securities and suspense accounts. If you've ever worked in accounting before, you know that you make use of suspense accounts when you receive in something and you're not exactly sure which account to place it in. A couple things here: don't net your debits with credits or your longs with shorts. Also that include all suspense account items even if you know they're not related to the customers. This portion of the rule is about getting things cleared quickly. This is a penalty. In other words, the firm is locking up cash because their operations is inefficient. Now, before relying on the time frames for including in the reserve calc, make sure they are actually suspense items. In other words, you really don't have an idea where they should be recorded. For example, if you know it's a customer's cash deposit, but you don't know which customer, then include it in the reserve calc. This occurs very frequently, especially when a registered rep makes a cash deposit, goes over to the bank, deposits the customer's check into the firm's checking account. However, it does not transmit the information to the company so they know which particular customer's account the funds should be recorded to. Now, if you have an entry that includes both a credit and a short security balance, generally that's going to be a contract like a fail to receive, then include the greater of the credit or the market value of the security. For line 9, items in transfer greater than 40 calendar days, you want to get written acknowledgement from the transfer agent. However, as we discussed earlier with the box count rules, that if the security's been in transfer more than 30 calendar days and is not confirmed, then you should treat it as a line 7 securities count difference and follow their rules. That's it for this presentation. If you have any additional questions, drop me an email at bob@rmmilburnconsulting.com. Thanks for your time today.